Howdy folks, hope you've all had a good weekend and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. I haven't been online much this weekend. I've had friends over for the weekend from Bristol, friends that I met through playing World of Warcraft. Really nice people and obsessed with cats, which meant they had fun staying at my place for the weekend. So like I said, I didn't get online much, but I did get online long enough to get myself a copy of Borderlands 4. Yeah, more on that in a bit. First this.
I'm sure we're all aware that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of data broker firms out there with expensive and extensive personal information databases holding your details which they trade on a daily basis. Information which, if it were to fall in the wrong hands, could, for example, be used by criminals to open credit accounts in your name, or file tax returns in your name, or commit crimes in your name. The kind of activities which could take months or possibly even years to repair the financial and reputational damage. Now, Incogni has always gone after these big data brokers on your behalf, and you can get yourself 60% off an exclusive Incogni plan by heading over to incogni.com/jingles and using code JINGLES at checkout. But what Incogni are now offering, under their unlimited and family unlimited plans, is a personal data removal service. If you happen to know, for example, of a people search website, just as one example, or any particular website that has your personal information, and you'd rather they didn't, simply copy the URL into Incogni, and one of their data protection agents will take care of everything else for you. New feature available under the Unlimited and Family Unlimited plans. And again, 60% exclusive discount by heading over to incogni.com/jingles and using code JINGLES at checkout and take your personal information off the market. Nino, what are you doing? Nino, I'm trying to record an ad. Personal information. Never worked with children or animals. Hello, Nino. And going after these data brokers on your behalf has always been Incogni's bread and butter. But did you know?
So, yeah, Borderlands 4. Actually, you know what, we'll come back to Borderlands 4 in a moment. First, let's get some actual good news out of the way. So, if you're a fan of Souls-like Star Wars games, then you're in luck, because if you haven't already got them, the two Star Wars Jedi games are currently available for massive discounts on Steam, all the way through to September the 23rd. Fallen Order is 75% off, which means it's basically $10, and Survivor is 80% off, $14. You can get the deluxe version of Survivor, which is only 70% off, but that still makes it just $26. So you can pick them both up for the price of, well, pick them both up for less than the price of a current AAA game release like Borderlands 4. So that's nice. And they are both good games. Although Survivor suffered from some performance issues on PC when it was first released, but those have mostly been patched out now. But either way, for the price that they're asking, it's an absolute bargain. Oh yeah. Performance issues on PC release. Don't worry, like I said, we'll be circling back around to Borderlands 4 in a bit. But first, more good news about excellent games that are currently available for almost nothing. If you've ever heard of Unity of Command, it was an amazingly good hex-based wargame that came out in 2011. No, wait, stop, don't run away, come back. I know hex-based wargames sound scary, but we're not talking Hearts of Iron 4 here. What Unity of Command did was take the genre and make it a lot more accessible to casual players who have basically never played wargames before. Well, now you can get the sequel, Unity of Command 2, for less than the price of a cup of coffee. This is, of course, assuming you buy your coffee at Starbucks, but, you know, even taking that into consideration, the 85% discount on Unity of Command 2 means the price is now down to $4.49. or £3.74. The original Unity of Command, the one that kicked it all off in 2011, and honestly, when it comes to playing a war game, the age of the game doesn't really matter because nobody's playing war games for their graphics. But you can get the original Unity of Command on an 80% discount, which means it will currently cost you only $2 or £1.70. So if you're brand new to wargaming or you fancy trying the genre but you don't really know where to start, I can definitely recommend Unity of Command and Unity of Command 2. And you can currently get them both on Steam for less than the price of a cup of coffee and a donut. Next, bit of tech news that honestly isn't that interesting and probably isn't going to affect any of you, but I'm going to mention it anyway because I found it mildly amusing. So, have you ever heard of the tech firm Oracle? I wouldn't be surprised if you hadn't, although it's likely that you might have if you work for any kind of large government agency. But it's possible that you might have heard them in some sort of news article like 10 years ago, and you're like, oh yeah, Oracle, I've heard of them, without even knowing who they are or what they do. Because they're generally not in the news in the same way that big tech companies like Google, Apple, Microsoft and Nvidia are. Now, I'd heard of Oracle because I used to work for a large government agency. They were called the Royal Navy. And how can I put this? My relationship with Oracle was not a great one. You see, we used to have this fantastic personnel accounting system in the Royal Navy. It was called PAS, which stood for Personal Accounting System. But the government decided that they wanted the Navy, the Air Force and the Army to all be using the same administrative software. Even though we all administered our people differently, but, you know, the government decided they wanted us to be efficient, and when the government says efficient, what they mean is cheaper, not necessarily better. So, big surprise, the contract for developing the replacement personnel administration system went to Oracle. They're a tech firm based in Texas, and they're primarily known for their database systems. And they're also primarily known, can you be primarily known for two things at the same time? I don't know, but I'm going to go with it. They're also primarily known for selling really, really shitty fucking software based on their database systems to government agencies who should know better. And that's basically what we got, this horrifically bad new accounting system that's called JPA, Joint Personnel Administration, that was equally terrible for the Navy, the Army, and the Air Force. And when I say bad, I mean I'm not making this shit up. Oracle's database systems are good. It's just that their interface is like something from the 17th century. I'm not exaggerating here. I mean, you know, the primary function of a personnel administration system is to be able to identify a person and then administer them. But using Oracle's JPA system, and again, there is not a word of exaggeration here. In order to learn how to do something as basic as just identifying and selecting the person that you needed to administer, required a 2-day qualifying course. Being taught by an instructor who had never used the system before, had no idea how it worked, and was simply repeating stuff from an instruction manual. So, if what they were saying didn't make sense, there was no point in asking them because they didn't know. So yeah, this was JPA. Fortunately, it was introduced right towards the end of my period of service in the Royal Navy, so I only had to suffer through using it for 2 years before I was out. But that was my introduction to Oracle. And it was not a good one. Oracle seems to basically make its living by selling its software backed up by its databases to government agencies. Which is why Oracle is as rich as they are. They're one of the richest tech companies on the planet, but it's also why they're one of the less well-known tech companies on the planet, because government contracts, you know, they don't hog the headlines like Microsoft and Apple and so on, because they don't do consumer electronics. So unless you've had the misfortune to work for a government agency that's been lumbered with Oracle's archaic database systems. I mean, like I say, the databases themselves are good, it's just the interfaces that are diabolical. But unless you've been unlucky enough to be in that kind of situation, it'd be completely unsurprising if you'd never heard of Oracle. And yet, despite that, they are one of the biggest tech companies on the planet. Extremely wealthy company. In fact, so wealthy that their recent $300 billion deal with OpenAI briefly replaced Elon Musk off the world's richest person spot, replacing him with Oracle's head honcho, Larry Ellison. A guy I'm sure most of you have almost certainly never heard of. But I'd heard of him because I had to use his products in my last few years in the Navy. And that's where I came across. And again, anybody who's worked for any kind of government agency that's ever been forced to use an Oracle database-related piece of software knows that what Oracle actually stands for is one rich arsehole called Larry Ellison. And sure enough, thanks to this deal with OpenAI, Oracle's share prices climbed just enough for Larry Ellison to actually become the richest man on the planet, although their share prices dipped again by the end of the day, and Elon Musk took over again. But I just thought that was kind of funny. While we're on the subject of tech news, have you ever heard of the Jupiter Project? Don't worry, until I saw the news headline, I'd never heard of the Jupiter Project either. It stands for Joint Undertaking Pioneer for Innovative and Transformative Exascale Research, which immediately makes me think of two things. One, that's a title that means absolutely nothing. It's basically 100% corporate techno-babble marketing bullshit. And also, you know 100% for an absolute fact that they came up with the acronym Jupiter first and then cobbled a bunch of words together to fit into it second. But what Jupiter is Europe's fastest supercomputer, and the tech specs are unbelievable. The short version is that it runs 24,000 NVIDIA G8200 superchips. It can perform operations in excess of 90 exaflops worth of AI performance and more than 1 quintillion FP64 operations per second. No, I don't know what that means either, but it's a big number. Its 51,000 network connections allow it to transmit 3 times more data than all global data traffic at any given moment. And it's 1 million terabytes of data storage, which will probably be enough to install at least one instance of Grand Theft Auto 6, although whether or not all of this processing power is going to be enough to run Far Cry at more than 60 frames per second is open to interpretation. The whole thing, of course, is being used for AI. And it's not even the fastest computer in the world. It's in 4th place. It's just the fastest one in Europe. The one performance parameter that they haven't publicised, because of course they haven't, is how much power this thing consumes. I suspect it's going to be a lot. I don't know exactly how many coal-powered power stations are going to be running at full tilt and pumping millions of metric tons of CO2 into the atmosphere in order to keep the lights on this thing so that you can get, your Google search results back a fraction of a second faster. But I suspect it's probably more than one. So, yeah. The 4th fastest computer in the world just went online in Germany. Next up. It's more gaming news this time. Not Borderlands 4 yet, don't worry, we're getting to it. Be patient. Star Citizen. If you remember, almost exactly 2 years ago, in an episode of Mingles with Jingles, I got really excited because Star Citizen had just announced that the single-player game campaign version, Squadron 42, had been declared feature complete, and all that remained was polishing. And I got really excited and made the mistake of saying, well, I didn't say that meant the game was going to be out that year, because this was October 2023, but I very, very foolishly assumed that meant we could probably expect to see Squadron 42 out the following year, in 2024. Because if you look at Robert Space Industries' own description of what feature complete and polishing means, feature complete means that all of the planned gameplay mechanics, story beats, and in-game locations are present in some form, and polishing means the game is in the process of fine-tuning, optimizing, bug fixing, and improving the overall gameplay experience to make it more immersive and polished. These are not my words, these are Chris Roberts' own words. So I very foolishly assumed that to mean that we could expect to be playing Squadron 42 at some point in 2024. You'll note that it's 2025 now. And in the comments section of that video, the acolytes of the Holy Church of Chris Roberts jumped all over me, and to be fair, they were right, saying, no. Nobody said the game was coming out in 2024. Nobody mentioned a specific date or year. And yeah, fair enough, they were right, I was wrong. So, obviously it didn't come out in the year that they announced it was feature complete, 2023, because there were only 2 months left of 2023 when they made the announcement, so yeah, that's fine. Clearly it didn't come out in 2024, which is what I expected, because it's 2025 now. In fact, we're almost out of 2025, and there's still no sign of it. Well, I say no sign of it in 2025. This year they did release, and if you haven't seen it, you should look it up on YouTube because it was massively impressive. But this year they did release the sort of video on YouTube of the first hour or so of Squadron 42 gameplay, combining full motion video and some early gameplay. And it was massively impressive, while at the same time announcing that Star Citizen Squadron 42 would be released. Obviously not in 2024, not in 2025, but in 2026. That's 3 years of polishing. Right. from when they announced that it was feature complete, so we can expect to see Star Citizen next year in 2026, only 3 years after announcing that it was almost ready to be published. Yeah, except not so much. Oh, how surprising, said absolutely nobody. During a recent Star Citizen Live showcase, the game's content director, who goes by the name of Jared Huckabee, said there will be no Squadron 42 presence at CitizenCon Direct, which is the 2-hour online showcase that's going to take place on October the 11th. He said, the team is heads down. We drew a line in the sand when we said 2026. I don't know if we're going to make it. I just know that we're going to do every single thing possible to make it. And part of that is not taking time for the distraction of CitizenCon. As Andy Chalk over at PC Gamer said, I don't know if we're going to make it is generally not the sort of thing you say when you're confident you're going to make it. In fact, I can't speak for anyone else, but for me, it is exactly the sort of thing I say when I'm pretty damn sure I'm not going to make it, and I want everyone in earshot to know that I tried real hard, but I'm making no promises. As one Redditor said, if they were really planning to release it in 2026, when they said they were going to release it, we would now start to see marketing ramp up. But not even talking about it at CitizenCon is the exact opposite. Another Redditor said, it will be delayed to 2027. I'm almost certain of it now. In response to the "Are you taking the piss?" outcry, the game's content director, Jared Huckabee, went into damage control mode, reiterating that he didn't specifically actually say that the game wouldn't be out in 2026. He just said that he didn't know it was going to be out in 2026. And, well, he's not lying, is he? Who knows anything? I'll tell you what I know. It was originally supposed to be out 11 years ago, in 2014. We got a close-up look at a massive near-finished level in 2015. Beta testing was scheduled to start in 2020. It was feature complete in 2023. And they can't keep getting away with this in 2025. And yet here we are, faced with the near certainty that overall Star Citizen crowdfunding will surpass $900 million before Squadron 42 sees the light of day, whether it makes a 2026 release or not. And let's face it, it's not. Feature complete in 2023, my fat arse. They just can't stop themselves from adding more stuff into the game, because nobody takes 4 years to polish a feature complete title. Finally, I told you we'd get there eventually, Borderlands 4. So it came out last week. And you know what? It's all right. I'm pretty famously known for not having any love whatsoever for Gearbox's CEO, Randy Pitchford, because he's a colossal dick. But credit where credit's due. I haven't played that much of it, but it's a good game. Initial impressions are that it is at least better than Borderlands 3. I haven't played enough of it to say whether or not it's as good as Borderlands 2, which was my favourite game in the series. But it's certainly not bad. It appears to have addressed one of the biggest complaints that people had about Borderlands 3. The Borderlands series has always been known for its juvenile humour, its fart jokes and so on and so on. And that's not a bad thing, but they really, really overdid it in Borderlands 3. Well, they've dialed it down a bit in Borderlands 4. The humour is there, and Claptrap is just as annoying as ever, but it's not there all the time. It's funny when it needs to be funny, and it's serious when it needs to be serious. So, yeah, gets a thumbs up from me where that's concerned. Gameplay, the gunplay, well, it's the same as every other Borderlands game. There are some new features, but I'm not here to give you a review and explain the features of a game that I've only really played for about 3 hours. What I can tell you is that what I have seen so far, I kind of like, and I'm enjoying. But I do appear to be in the minority where that's concerned. Because the game released to mostly negative reviews, and over the weekend that's climbed up to mixed. And I don't think that can all be laid down to people review bombing the game because they hate Randy Pitchford. There are some legitimate concerns. And it seems to mostly not really be due to the gameplay or the content, but due to the performance. Some of those negative Steam reviews, again, as reported by PC Gamer, included terrible, terrible performance, worst I've ever seen. Turned it down to low graphics presets and I couldn't hit 60 frames per second, even with FSR upscaling on my 6900 XT. Another user said 30 frames per second at native medium to high settings on 1440p with a 3080 Ti. It looks worse than Borderlands 3, to be honest. I don't know how it runs this bad. Even the positive reviews, of which there are not that many, do note the game's performance issues. Game is good, but the performance is not. Frame generation plus DLSS is almost mandatory unless you have an RTX 5090. Oh, that sounds like a bit of foreshadowing, and sure enough, just a couple of days later, lo and behold, another PC Gamer News headline. Even with a 9800X3D and an RTX 5090, it runs like absolute butt cheeks. The guy who posted this particular glorious Steam review went on to say, I mean, I can play the game, but the horsepower cost is ridiculous. The funny thing is, I have 9800X3D and an RTX 5090. And, yeah, he's not wrong. I mean, since today's episode of Mingles with Jingles started, I've been running Borderlands 4 early gameplay in the background. You might have noticed some stuttering. Because, yeah, even with a computer that costs £5,000, I can't run this thing on maximum settings, even with DLSS and frame generation, and get 60 frames per second. And when I crank the settings down to a level where I can, I mean, they're still high quality settings, but they're definitely not maximum settings. But when I crank the settings down to a level where I can maintain a stable 60 frames per second in this game, I still get stuttering with some pretty nasty 1% lows. Doesn't happen often, but it happens often enough to notice. And this is on a 9800X3D with 64 gigabytes of DDR6 RAM and an RTX 5090 graphics card. This is a machine that can run Crysis at 60 frames per second, but it can't run Borderlands 4 at 60 frames per second. Now, 2K have published a settings optimization guide, which helps, and to be fair, the game still looks good even on medium and low settings, but also even on medium and low settings, people are still getting stuttering and really bad 1% lows, which sounds to me like something that isn't going to go away just because we start optimizing our settings according to guides published by 2K. This is happening, kind of like every other Borderlands release, because on release it's a ropey, unoptimized, buggy mess, because the publisher, and I'm not calling out 2K specifically in this regard because every other major publisher is the same, but it's because the publisher has a release now, fix later policy. And if you keep pre-ordering these games, they will continue to do it, because until we stop doing that, they've got no reason to release games that actually work the way they're supposed to. So my recommendation is Borderlands 4. Yeah, it's fine. It's certainly at least better than Borderlands 3. But even if you're a fan of the Borderlands series, I would delay buying this game for a month or two until they've fixed all the problems that they should have fixed before release. So on that bombshell, I'm heading back to the Legacy of the Forge DLC for Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, because unlike Borderlands 4, that just works. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.